Thank you. Thank you very much, Krzysztof and Tobias and Furz and all the organizers and for all the participants. It's a real pleasure to be here. Let me just get that up there. Okay. Although I will be discussing a number of definitions of conspiracy theory in this paper, I will not be offering one of my own. That's because I don't think there's such a thing as a good or correct definition of this term or of related terms such as conspiracy theorist, conspiracism, conspiracist ideation, and so on. I hold that we should stop using as opposed to mentioning these terms altogether. They appear to do no good while doing considerable harm. In the not too distant past, we got by without them. We can and should learn to do so again. It's true that there are some circumstances in which, in the words of Bishop Berkeley, I quote, "We ought to think with the learned and speak with the vulgar." Hence, I will occasionally speak with the vulgar by using some of these terms in accordance with specific definitions to be found in the literature, in order to bring out implications of them which those who have put them forward appear not to have recognized. Otherwise, I will be refraining from using them, and I will be urging others to do likewise. Ever since the term conspiracy theory was popularized by the philosopher Sir Karl Popper in the late 1950s and early 1960s, conspiracy theories have had a bad reputation. To call a theory a conspiracy theory is to imply that it is false and that the people who believe it or who would like to investigate whether it is true, that is, conspiracy theorists, are irrational. Conspiracy theories are widely held to be not only false and the products of irrationality, but also to be particularly harmful. Hence, they are widely thought of as a problem, which might be solved or at least mitigated through the intervention of social scientists, psychologists, and even philosophers. The problem is typically thought of as of quite recent origin, or at any rate one which has recently been getting worse, especially in the age of COVID-19, when conspiracy theories are routinely spoken of as a threat to public safety and even to democracy itself. I think all of this is wrong, not in detail, but all of it. Conspiracy theories are not a new or growing problem. In fact, conspiracy theories as such are not a problem at all. Contrary to conventional wisdom, we do not have a problem with conspiracy theories. We do, however, have a problem with the term conspiracy theory, along with related terms it has given rise to. And this problem really is quite new and increasingly widespread. The emergence and spread of a set of terms has been conflated with the emergence and spread of phenomena to which those terms putatively refer. As a society, we've made a collective use-mention error. The spread of pieces of language has wrongly been taken for the spread of things corresponding to them in the world. In this paper, I will be concentrating on the psychological literature on conspiracy theories because I regard its influence as a particular cause for concern. If, as I've argued elsewhere, the term conspiracy theory plays the role in our secular society that the term heresy once played in medieval Europe, that of stigmatizing beliefs that contradict the teachings of the most powerful institutions of the day, then psychology plays the role of the Inquisition, that of defining and enforcing orthodoxies. This is a very troubling situation, especially since the beliefs that attract the pejorative label conspiracy theory tend to be marginalized political beliefs. There's a disturbing history of psychologists pathologizing marginalized political views. We are not yet institutionalizing people whose political beliefs are deemed unacceptable by the state or other powerful institutions, as happened in the Soviet Union, or at least we're not doing it systematically and en masse, a point I'll return to later in relation to Martha Mitchell. But we have got to the point that a group of prominent psychologists have written to a leading French newspaper, Le Monde, calling on the French government to more effectively fight what they refer to as the disease of conspiracy theories. The authors of this letter, of whom there are many, as you can see, do not say what they mean by conspiracy theories, nor do they define related terms that appear in the letter, such as, quote, conspiracy thinking or conspiracism. It's simply assumed that we all know what these terms refer to and that the things they refer to are very bad things indeed. One of the most striking things about the conspiracy theory literature including the literature from within psychology, is that the authors almost invariably assume that they're all talking about the same things, when closer examination of their definitions, when they bother to give definitions, reveals that they are not. I hope to make it clear that when Michael J. Wood claims that, quote, since the mid-1990s, a growing psychological research tradition has generated a great deal of knowledge about the antecedents and consequence of belief in conspiracy theories, he is mistaken. Equivocations over the use of these terms has created an illusion of progress. Let me just turn to some of those definitions. I call these neutral definitions in the psychology literature. So most definitions in the psychology literature and elsewhere are neutral in the sense that they don't explicitly say what is supposed to be objectionable about conspiracy theories. They don't, for example, say explicitly that they're false or that belief in them is irrational or harmful. Here's just 4 samples of such definitions I've got from fairly prominent articles in the literature. I won't read them out just now. I'll just leave you to look at them for a moment. I'll point out some differences between them. So these definitions vary in significant ways and clearly pick out quite different phenomena. For example, 1 requires the conspiracies in question to be both malevolent and illegal, whereas 2 merely requires them to be perceived as either one or the other. 3 and 4, by contrast, do not require them to be illegal or even to be perceived as illegal, while 4, which is easily the broadest of them, makes no reference to either illegality or malevolence, or for that matter, any other moral property. The differences between what these authors, according to their own definitions, are talking about should not, however, be allowed to obscure something common to them all, something which is generally and rather astoundingly routinely overlooked. On each of these definitions, not only some, but many conspiracy theories are true and are well known to be true. Precisely how many are true will depend in part on which definition we adopt and perhaps how we understand the word malevolent, which occurs in 3 of them. Nonetheless, it's perfectly clear that there are and always have been plenty of groups of people who have joined forces secretively, and that many of them are reasonably understood to be malevolent. Although many conspiracy theories on each of these definitions are true, the examples of conspiracy theories cited in all 4 articles and in most of the literature on the subject, both inside and outside psychology, are clearly believed to be false by the authors. What's more, they clearly expect their readers to agree that those examples are false. One example mentioned in all 4 of these articles, and much, if not most, of the other literature on the subject, the theory according to which a conspiracy was responsible for John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, is worth some consideration. I'm no expert on the historical facts about this case, and I see no reason to think that any of the authors in this literature are either. One thing is clear, however, the fact that belief that more than one person was involved in this assassination is a conspiracy theory is no reason at all for thinking that it is false, or for thinking that those who believe it do so as the result of an irrational or non-rational process. It may or may not be the case that there was a conspiracy behind JFK's assassination, but it is certainly true that there were conspiracies behind the assassinations of Julius Caesar, Abraham Lincoln, Tsar Alexander II, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and Anwar Sadat, just to mention a very small selection of examples. Charles Pigden has reviewed high-profile assassinations of late 16th and early 17th century Europe and found that about half of them were the products of conspiracy. There seems no reason to think that conspiracies in general and conspiratorial assassinations in particular are less common now than they were then. Conspiracy is, after all, a form of behaviour that is common in all human societies and has always been particularly prevalent in politics. Does this matter? Couldn't these psychologists say that they're not concerned with normative issues concerning whether particular conspiracy theories are true or rationally believed? Rather, they're concerned with empirical questions about the causes and effects of belief in them. As Wood, who I mentioned before, puts it, They are trying to, and I quote, find the antecedents and consequence of belief in conspiracy theories without specifying whether they are true or whether they are held on rational grounds. In fact, this attitude seems to be quite widespread amongst psychologists writing on this topic. The authors of the Le Monde article letter I mentioned earlier explicitly say, so I can just go back to that because I had the quote down at the bottom of this slide, say that they focus on the psychology and sociology of conspiracy theories conceived as the outcome of situational factors, personality and cognitive traits, and this kicker, largely unrelated to the truth or falsity of said conspiracies. Of course, they should have said conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories are true or false, conspiracies either occur or don't. The idea that we can address substantive psychological, or for that matter, sociological questions about the causes of any category of belief in a way that is unrelated or largely unrelated to the truth or falsity of the beliefs in question is deeply misguided. For example, if you want to explain why I believe that I am married, the first thing you have to do is find out whether in fact I am married. No attempt to explain my belief that doesn't first settle the issue of whether the belief is true is going to be credible. This is because, putting aside extremely rare or far-fetched cases of the kind philosophers love to consider when analysing knowledge, when a person's belief is true, that fact is central to any adequate explanation of why he or she holds that belief. This point may perhaps be made clearer if we consider a different category of theory, one which doesn't have the bad reputation conspiracy theories suffer from, namely scientific theories. Suppose psychologists or a group of psychologists decided to investigate why people believe scientific theories without regard to whether the theories in question were true. The proposal would, of course, be treated by serious scholars as a piece of relativistic confusion. There may, though I very much doubt it, be some interesting generalizations to be made about why people believe false scientific theories, but there can be no prospect at all of a general truth-independent and informative account of why they believe scientific theories. For the same reason, there can be no prospect of a general truth-independent and informative account of why people believe conspiracy theories. The explicit claim of some psychologists that they are offering such an account is disingenuous. They are inevitably implicitly assuming that when they talk about conspiracy theories, they are talking about a category of false and irrational belief, that is the kind of belief that stands in need of psychological explanation. So move on to a second set. Those were the neutral definitions. So what's wrong with neutral definitions? Just summarize. Many conspiracy theories so understood are true, many, not just some, but many, and hence don't require explanation, or at any rate, they don't require the same kind of explanation that false beliefs do. Moving on to loaded definitions or non-neutral definitions. Perhaps aware of this problem, a small number of psychologists and philosophers have recently tried to bring the objectionable features of conspiracy theories into their definitions. Here are three examples of such loaded, or as I shall argue, question-begging definitions. Three of them, the third is by Neil Levy as a philosopher. The first two are psychological literature, from the psychological literature. Now you'll notice what they've done is they've built the objectionable feature of conspiracy theories into the definition itself. So you'll notice in definition 1, relatively implausible. In definition 2, when other explanations are more probable. Definition 3, they are by definition unwarranted. These definitions are, of course, quite different from the neutral ones we've considered before. Although, as we saw, many conspiracy theories understood in accordance with the neutral definitions are true, few conspiracy theories understood in accordance with any of these loaded definitions are true. However, this fact has nothing to do with conspiracies or theories about them, and everything to do with the trivial fact that very few implausible, improbable, or unwarranted theories of any kind are true. Loaded definitions like this are extremely unnatural and misleading, to put it mildly, and should be rejected. There are at least 3 reasons for this. Let's go through them. First, they're misleading because unlike any other category of theory, think of scientific theory, number theory, film theory, etc., conspiracy theories understood this way are supposed to be implausible, improbable, or unwarranted by definition. Hence, these definitions encourage the misguided idea that there's something wrong with believing theories according to which conspiracies have or are taking place. Second, these definitions don't accord with the author's actual practice, since they all cite findings, I'll put that inside inverted commas there, about conspiracy theorists from psychologists who are using neutral definitions of the kind we've considered, as if they were all talking about the same thing, when clearly they're not, at least if their definitions are to be accepted. But the third and most fundamental problem with these definitions is that they reduce the objectionable feature of conspiracy theories to a trivial matter of definition. If the objectionable qualities of conspiracy theories are just a matter of definition, those who object to conspiracy theories are making a purely semantic point. When they advise people not to believe conspiracy theories, they are just advising them not to believe conspiracy theories that are implausible, unwarranted, and/or unlikely to be true. Of course, we shouldn't believe conspiracy theories understood in this way, but this is just an instance of the general fact, which is a virtual tautology, that we shouldn't believe theories that are implausible, unwarranted, and/or unlikely to be true. This is not particularly useful advice. Furthermore, it is advice which has nothing to do with conspiracies or with theories which postulate their existence. Presumably, critics of conspiracy theories are saying something more than that, which incidentally is why most people who bother to define the concept at all still offer neutral rather than one or more of these loaded definitions. Now, I anticipate an objection to my whole line of reasoning here. At this point, people might say I'm just quibbling over definitions. Let's put the semantic issues aside and say, look, surely there really is a problem with what's often called conspiracism or conspiratorial ideation. In other words, there's a movement to say, and this is in a lot of the literature, both in psychology and philosophy that I'm aware of at the moment, a move to say the problem is not with conspiracy theories, the problem is with conspiracism or conspiracist ideation or something along those lines. So terminology varies a bit, but that's the basic idea. Now, what is conspiracism? What is conspiracist ideation? Standard account of this is it's a disposition to be overly credulous towards conspiracy theories, overly willing, in other words, to believe in conspiracies. And if that's right, there really is an issue about how that problem should be addressed. And perhaps if we put aside my snarky comments, we can all, psychologists, social scientists, and philosophers, make progress towards addressing that problem. Now, in fact, I've come to think that there is no such problem. I've certainly never seen any evidence that there is. I've discussed this matter at greater length elsewhere. Here I will confine myself to pointing out a few of the problems with attempts to establish that this so-called problem exists, before arguing that there is good reason to believe that these problems can't be fixed. To start with, several of the beliefs psychologists and others have offered in as evidence of so-called conspiracism or conspiracist ideation are actually true. A classic example of this, which is in the literature everywhere, is belief in a conspiracy by American government agencies to bring drugs into American inner city communities. It continues even now to be routinely cited by authors in this literature as evidence of conspiracist ideation, despite it being true. I can send literature on this if you're interested. Since it is true, it can hardly be used as evidence of excessive willingness to believe in conspiracies. If anything, the example demonstrates the opposite fault in those using this example, excessive reluctance to believe in conspiracies. Other beliefs regularly cited within the literature as evidence of conspiracism or conspiracist ideation, such as the belief that there were conspiracies behind the assassination of JFK or Martin Luther King, remain highly controversial. Reasonable and well-informed people, in my opinion, disagree about whether there really were conspiracies in those cases. Hence, they cannot be cited as evidence of conspiracist ideation or conspiracism, that is a tendency to give too much credence to conspiracy theories. Now, of course, some of the examples of purported conspiracies cited in the literature clearly did not take place. Indeed, some of them are such that there is a legitimate question about how large numbers of people could come to believe that they did take place. However, it doesn't follow, and in fact, it doesn't seem to be true, that people believe these conspiracies because they suffer from so-called conspiracism. And this moves on to the third point on the slide in front of you. Okay. Many of these concern situations in which there's no controversy at all about whether a conspiracy occurred. The only controversy is over which conspiracy theory is true. That is, what is the identity of the actual conspirators? A good historical example of this worth mentioning, many of you will be familiar, especially those who know a bit about English history, with the so-called conspiratorial correspondence of Mary, Queen of Scots, in a series of letters that are passed down to us from history, which purport to be Mary, Queen of Scots, plotting to kill the Queen and take over herself. Some historians, however, believe that that correspondence is forged, that she didn't really write the so-called conspiratorial letters. Whoever's right, I don't have an opinion in that issue, though I tend, as a good Catholic, to side with Mary. I don't have a real horse in that race, but whoever's right about it, a conspiracy took place. It was either a conspiracy by Mary and her co-conspirators, or it was a conspiracy by Elizabeth and her co-conspirators. It's just a question of which conspiracy theory was true. And the same thing goes for the 9/11 attacks, which is easily the most widely cited example in the recent psychological literature of the alleged vice of conspiracism. It's treated as a paradigm of a conspiracy theory and evidence of conspiracist ideation or conspiracism in all the literature I've just cited there, in virtually all the literature since 2001, as far as I can tell. Now, this belief that American government agencies were behind the 9/11 attacks is, of course, false. And furthermore, it is evidence of some kind of irrationality, though not necessarily the same sort in everyone who has the belief. However, this belief clearly isn't explicable in terms of conspiratorial ideation or conspiracism, because it doesn't involve belief in conspiracy in favor of a non-conspiratorial explanation of events. Rather, it involves belief in one conspiracy rather than another, in this case, real conspiracy, namely the one that took place amongst the 19 hijackers, Al-Qaeda, and perhaps others. Charles Pigden has pointed out the absurdity of trying to explain 9/11 without supposing there to have been some sort of conspiracy in the following passage. As he puts it, nobody halfway sane supposes the events of 9/11 were not due to some conspiracy or the other. To think that, you would have to suppose that the perpetrators assembled in the planes quite by chance, and that on a sudden, by coincidence, it struck them as a neat idea to hijack the planes and ran them into the Twin Towers, the White House, and the Pentagon with the aid of other perpetrators whom presumably they'd never met before. What does this show? It shows that those who believe that the American government agencies planned 9/11, they're certainly mistaken, but they're not mistaken because they suffer from conspiracism or conspiratorial ideation. They're not mistaken because they believe in a conspiratorial explanation of this event rather than a non-conspiratorial one. They're absolutely correct to believe in a conspiratorial explanation. Their mistake concerns the identity of the conspirators. The problem with the psychological literature on this subject goes deeper than mere reliance on some poorly chosen examples. If psychologists genuinely want to find out if there is a problem of conspiracism or conspiracist ideation, that is, excessive willingness to believe conspiracy theories, they'll need to first have an idea of how willing one should be to believe in conspiracy theories. And that would require them to have an idea of how widespread actual conspiracies are. Unfortunately, this is not a question which psychologists are particularly well qualified to answer. If anyone has expertise relevant to this issue, they would presumably be historians or political scientists. As it happens, I don't think there are experts on this topic, but I think some people have more knowledge than others, of course, but it's too broad a topic to allow for expertise as such. At any rate, as we have seen, psychologists, so far from being experts on this topic, are often, especially the ones who write about it, remarkably naive about it. And this naivety is dangerous. There are well-documented cases of psychologists being used by the state to persecute people for believing in real conspiracies. The Martha Mitchell effect is the name given by Harvard psychologist Brendan Maher to a process in which a psychiatrist or a psychologist labels a patient's accurate beliefs as delusional and misdiagnoses accordingly. Martha Mitchell, after whom the phenomenon is named, was the wife of Richard Nixon's Attorney General, John Mitchell. When she accused her husband and other White House officials of engaging in illegal conspiracies, the White House responded with a coordinated campaign to portray her claims as the product of mental illness. She appears to have been held against her will by administration thugs and injected with sedatives by an unidentified doctor. Ultimately, of course, she was vindicated and her former husband was convicted of several crimes, including conspiracy. Okay, in conclusion, there are, of course, some beliefs that are, in some sense, conspiracy theories, which are both false and irrational, QAnon being an obvious contemporary example. However, it does not follow, and it is not true, that these are false or irrational because they are conspiracy theories. The flaws with these theories have nothing to do with the fact that they postulate conspiracy. To dismiss them as conspiracy theories is to dismiss them for the wrong reason, and it leads to a variety of harms, not only to the individuals who are dismissed in this way, but also to the society as a whole. So here are the kinds of harms that pejorative uses of the term conspiracy theory result in. Every time we dismiss someone's opinion on the ground that it is a so-called conspiracy theory, we're implying, even if we do not mean to, that there is something wrong with believing, wanting to investigate, or giving any credence at all to the possibility that people, and especially powerful people, are engaged in secretive or deceptive behaviour. The net effect of this practice is to silence people who are suspicious of or would like to investigate the behaviour of powerful people. These terms serve to herd opinion, or at any rate respectable opinion, in ways that suit the influences, the interests of the powerful, and make it more likely that they will be able to get away with secretive and deceptive behaviour. In a word, conspiracy. So one bad effect of these terms is that they contribute to a political environment in which it's easier for conspiracy to thrive at the expense of openness. Another bad effect of them is that their use is an injustice to the individuals who are characterised as conspiracy theorists, or whose beliefs are characterised as conspiracy theories. Borrowing Miranda Fricker's terminology, we may call this a form of testimonial injustice. I said epistemic injustice on that slide, but it's more specific, what she calls testimonial injustice. When someone asserts that a conspiracy has taken place, especially when it is a conspiracy by powerful people, that person's word is automatically given less credence than it should because of an irrational prejudice produced by the pejorative connotations of these terms. When professional psychologists pathologize belief in conspiracy theories or so-called conspiratorial ideation by treating them as a phenomena standing in need of psychological explanation, this can be seen as a form of gaslighting, the manipulation of people into doubting their own sanity. I look forward to the day that we can look back on the pseudoscientific study of conspiracy theories in the same way that we look back on phrenology. I have argued against the current pejorative use of the term conspiracy theory. What's the alternative? Broadly speaking, there are two options. First, we could retain the term without the pejorative connotations. This is the option that Charles Pigden takes, arguing that a conspiracy theory should be understood simply as a theory according to which a conspiracy has taken place, and that conspiracy theories should be evaluated on their merits like any other theory. While this would certainly be preferable to the current situation, I don't think stripping the term of its negative connotations is practically feasible. So Pigden's idea is something like the way terms which have historically pejorative terms like queer or witch have been reclaimed by the kinds of people who would in the past have been targeted with that pejorative language. I don't think that in the end is desirable. It's certainly preferable to the current situation, but I don't think that stripping the term of its negative connotations is practically feasible. Furthermore, it's not clear to me that the term would serve any useful purpose without those negative connotations. It was born with negative connotations, and I hope it will die with them. Hence, I prefer another option, elimination. There simply is no such thing as a correct or even a good definition of this term. We should stop using it altogether. It appears to do no good while doing considerable harm. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, David. That was a really great talk. I will now let people unmute themselves. And if you have a question,